Have you been interested in trying markers for realism? Today I will show you how I drew this butterfly using Faber-Castell Pitt pens and Winsor & Newton pigment markers. Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artist at Play, and today I am working in markers. If you have been following along with my art for a long time, or if you have seen my 3 marker challenge, then you know that I don't really work with markers very often, but I am someone who loves to experiment with different techniques and different mediums, and lately I have really been in the mood to work with markers. So one of the things, I've actually been wanting to try markers for a long time. I have done a few pieces in the past. This is probably, if you include my 3 marker challenge, my 4th marker piece in recent years. So obviously I don't work with them for very often, but I have been in the mood to work with them for a while now. And behind the scenes, I have been experimenting with different papers and swatching on different kinds of surfaces so that I can figure out the best ways to blend. The markers that I am using today are the Winsor & Newton pigment markers and the Faber-Castell Pitt pens, which I have more of the Pitt pens than I do of the pigment markers. I am also using one Liquitex Basics acrylic marker for the highest highlights in white, which I think I have a Winsor & Newton pigment marker that is a white blending marker, which pretty much does the same thing, but I find I can get more of the white to come out of my Liquitex one, which is why you'll see me actually switching back between the two of them depending on the kind of highlight that it is. But, so this video was not sponsored in any way, it's just something fun that I wanted to do. So, as I said, I have been trying to try out different surfaces for markers, because I want to find the ones that blend the best. These are water-based and pigment-based markers. The Faber-Castell ones are India ink. So these are very permanent light-fast markers, which is why I prefer to work with these and the pigment markers. The pigment markers are all light fast, and that's a high selling point for markers. I do not work with alcohol-based markers when I am trying to do artwork that I would like to sell, because alcohol-based markers by nature are not light fast, whereas some water-based and obviously like India ink and things like that, like the ones that I'm doing now, are light fast. So that's why I prefer to work with these markers over alcohol markers. However, alcohol markers blend a lot more easily than water-based markers. So I have been on a journey to try and find surfaces that work well for water-based markers. And of course, certain papers are really hard because the markers just tear them right up. Even multimedia surfaces, it's been difficult. I have tried the Yupo paper, which is something that a lot of people like to use with the pigment markers, but I find it to be too slippery for me. I don't know. I'm gonna try it again, but I've only swatched a few times, but I didn't think I would like it. Well, the other night, it dawned on me that I have some sanded paper hanging around. And I know sanded paper probably sounds really counterintuitive when it comes to markers, but I could picture myself blending markers on this paper in my mind. So I'm like, you know what? I have to try this. I've tried a bunch of other things. I want to see if I can blend marker on this. And so the other night, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you probably saw I posted a picture that I did of a bird. And it has a nice little green bokeh background, and it's just a simple drawing that I did the other day. Sorry, I'm missing some footage there, so it just kind of jumped magically, so I apologize for that missing footage. So anyways, I actually had tried marker on Fisher 400 sanded paper, and it actually worked really well, like to the point where I was so excited that I had to do it again. And that's what I'm working on today. Now, I know that it's probably not appropriate to use markers on sanded paper. It sounds really bad. And it does kind of wear away the tips a little bit, but not as much as expected. And it's just so easy to blend on this paper. I think what happens is the water-based marker kind of sits in between the pieces of sand for a little bit longer and doesn't dry out immediately. So it makes it easier to blend, whereas if you do it on watercolor paper or something like that, the paper might absorb it and it might dry out quicker and it makes it harder to blend. So that's why I'm working on this paper. And I'm working from one of my own reference photos that I took of a butterfly when I went to a butterfly sanctuary. And I'm not exactly sure what kind of butterfly it is. But I am super excited about this technique. It did, like I said, I didn't really notice any problems with my pigment markers as far as the tips wearing down. Where I started to notice it was on the markers that I use the most out of my Faber-Castell markers, because my Faber-Castell markers are brush markers to begin with, and so the nibs on them are worn down a little bit more because I used the greens especially. I use them a lot. So I am going to still be in pursuit of a good surface to work with on markers that would obviously damage them a little bit less. But for now, if I do this technique, I'm just really, really gentle about it, and I just keep an eye on my markers. These markers are not refillable anyway. They are all disposable in the end. At least I don't think the Winsor Newton ones are refillable. I haven't actually looked into that, but I know the Pitt pens are not refillable. So eventually I'm going to use them up anyways, and I'm going to have to throw them out and buy new ones. So that being said, I mean, obviously I don't want to damage my markers. I'm just really surprised at how little damage it did. It's just over time that I'm worried about it. But as you can see, I've blocked in most of the background. As with most of my artwork, I always like to do the background before I do the subject because I feel like it sets the tone for the subject, but it's also my own thing where I don't want to rush through it. I want to make sure that it's right, and I know that if I do my main subject first and then I mess up on the background, I'm going to be really aggravated. So I usually do my background first. And I'm just going back and forth between my Pitt pens and my pigment markers, which work really well together, by the way. I think next time I do marker, I want to try it on ampersand gesso board or something to that degree. This paper I actually got from my friend Nick Edgar, and if you're somebody who follows Lisa Clow from La Cree Fine Art, you've probably seen Nick's name. He is a moderator in the group, and he's also a moderator now on her live streams, so you might know his name. He actually lives right around the corner from me, and he was generous enough to give me some of his Fisher 400 paper for me to try with the brush and pencil products, which I will still do. I still have a bunch of this paper left. I have a harder time with the brush and pencil products. It's just a technique that I haven't really nailed down yet. But he does some great work with it, and that's why he gave me this paper. But I have found that this paper is awesome for so many different mediums. It works really well for oil pastels, for instance, and now I've discovered that it works well with marker. It's just really an exciting paper, but it came in a roll, and that's why I had a hard time getting it to stay taped down. I'm going to have to flatten it out, and I'll probably end up mounting it later. And it's a kind of a off-white color. I'd like to try and find some sanded paper that's more white because it'll make it easier for me to, especially if I'm doing this technique, to reserve my whites and not have to use my white markers. Now I'm just putting some detail in the flowers. I had a harder time with the flowers because the colors, those markers are so vibrant, and it was very difficult, like, man, they just stained the paper so well that it was very difficult to get the sunlit look that I wanted, so I had to go over it with my white quite a bit. And they're still not as vibrant as I would like. I think I might try to do, down the line, I might try and practice some flowers in markers at some point just to get better at it. Because you don't get good at anything unless you practice, right? You don't get good at it by avoiding it, that's for sure. So I'll probably end up doing a picture of a flower with markers at some point. But I've been on a major butterfly kick lately, and so I've had this reference photo for over a year. And as soon as I realized how much I liked this technique when I did the bird drawing the other night, this was the first reference photo that came to mind for me to draw. Mostly because I actually have the colors to do it. I need to get more markers. That's another problem. I'm limited on the amount of colors I have right now, and I definitely want to get a ton more. So now I'm just going through and putting some of the details in the body of the butterfly and in the legs, and I'm just using, I think actually I'm using like a dark gray Pitt pen for that, and then I go back with black to darken certain spots. And that marker that I just used there was a colorless blender. So I have a colorless blender, and I also have the white blender, but I also throughout this, you might notice, you'll see me using a water brush where, you know, it's, what is that, a pen brush? I don't know exactly what they call it, but you can fill the barrel of the brush with water. People use it for watercolor. And I used that to blend the marker too, and that actually worked. Not as well as the colorless blender, but for subtle blending, it worked really well. So now I'm just going through, and I'm doing like layering. So in places that I'm going to be using black on the butterfly, yes, on the butterfly, not the blutterfly, but the butterfly. When I use black on that, I usually lay down a color first. And I don't even think I fully used black on it. I think I did like a dark gray. Because markers can be a little bit, they tend to be very saturated. And so it's darker. Right now I'm just putting some of the details in the wings. And when I drew this out, I actually used a colored mechanical pencil to draw this out. And I used purple because purple is a complementary color to the colors that I'm using in the butterfly, but it's also a near complement to green. So I figured that it would be really good if when I blend it out, even if it shows a little bit, it's going to be pretty with the colors around it. And I should have sprayed it down, but I was just too impatient. I was so excited. This drawing I actually did all in one day. And normally, especially if it's like colored pencil or something else, for something this detailed, it definitely usually takes me longer than a day to do. I have to split it up in settings. I actually went to a birthday party yesterday and then came home and did this and had it done by last night. Because markers, it's just like, it goes so fast. Plus, I was just so excited, and I was having so much fun that I just couldn't stop. I took a break for supper, I think, and then after that, I just kept going. So what I've been figuring out, though, is that I usually lay down like a darker color, and then I blend it out with a lighter color. So in here, I'm laying out my browns and my oranges that I need, and then I'm going back over it with my yellow. And it was giving me the tones that I wanted. I was just so excited by how well this blended out. And again, this isn't perfect because, like I said, it's only like my 4th ever marker drawing as an adult. So there's definitely areas where I could improve, but I think the more I do it, the more I'll hone it, and, you know, the more I'll discover, you know, different techniques to do different things. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's great to experiment with different mediums. Like I said, my favorite mediums tend to be colored pencil and acrylic, and I've been doing acrylic for years. I mean, since I was a teenager. And colored pencil I picked up probably about 4 years ago now, and I fell in love with colored pencil instantly. So I think it's refreshing, though, to not just stick with your favorite mediums and to try new things, and to especially try things that you don't think that you would necessarily like. Because for the longest time, I didn't think I would like marker because all I could picture was Crayola markers and just streaks abound. Like, I could not even, I couldn't fathom having a finished piece of artwork in marker. Until I actually started going on YouTube more and following different artists and seeing what other people were up to. And really, it's mostly like I watch a lot of people who work with Copic markers, and I love their work. And that's what really got me thinking about it. But then I knew that Copics are very pricey. They're wonderful to work with, but they're pricey. And even on their website, in their frequently asked questions, it talks about how they're not light fast. And I can't bring myself to spend $8 on a marker and to do a piece that's just not going to be light fast after. So after that was in the pursuit of markers that are light fast, and that's how I discovered Pitt pens, and then Winsor & Newton came out with their pigment markers, and that's when I was like, okay, it's time for me to really start trying some techniques in marker. And I've had some of these markers for a while, but like I said, I just don't do it very often because I have been trying to find good paper to work on. And like I said before, I'm very surprised at how well my markers held up to sanded paper. Obviously, sanded paper is a little bit rough. This is a nice, fine sanded paper. I will definitely be getting more of this paper down the line because there's so many different techniques I want to try on it and so many different mediums I want to try on it. I think I almost enjoy shopping for paper as much as I enjoy shopping for art supplies. And I enjoy shopping for art supplies almost as much as I enjoy using them. It's a problem probably, but I'm sure you understand if you're watching this, you're probably an artist and you probably understand that feeling. It's just very exciting to try new things. And so here I am using a paintbrush and I'm touching it to the tip of my marker, my Liquitex Basics marker, and I'm using that to paint on the white because neither of my markers had a fine enough tip. Neither of my white markers had a fine enough tip for me to do the details. So I just took a small paintbrush and used the pigment from there and painted it on that way. And it worked pretty well. So I'm just going back and forth now. I'm doing touch-ups and just, doing like the fine details and darkening things where I need to and lightening them where I need to. Trying to get some more detail into those flowers. All in all, this was just a really fun piece. Like I said, it went by so quickly. It's such an awesome feeling when you feel that inspired to do something. And I'm really happy with the way it came out, considering this is something that I'm not very experienced with. But I think once you learn certain skills, they can translate across mediums. I'm somebody who gets bored with just one medium, so you will see me working in different mediums all the time. I've also been in the mood to play with watercolors lately, so you'll probably be seeing some videos soon of me doing some watercolor pieces. But I think that as long as you can do one medium, it's easy to translate those skills to others. Like, you're going to learn the basics of composition, you're going to learn the basics of values and colors and things like that, and then you can translate those basics to whatever medium you're using. I look at style as something that's independent of medium. I think that if you have a style, then it's going to show through no matter what medium you're working in, unless you intentionally are doing a different style. Like, sometimes I like to do illustration, for instance. Then obviously it's going to be different. But as far as realism goes, when I do my realism work, I think you can pretty well tell it's my work, whether it was a marker piece that I did, a watercolor piece I did, a colored pencil piece I did, or acrylics or oils or whatever I'm working in at the time. And I think a lot of people are afraid to try new things because they're afraid that people won't know it was theirs. They're afraid to try new mediums, but that's not the case. If you have a style, that will cross over in mediums if you want it to. Like I said, if you're trying to work in that particular style. I've worked with marker quite a bit in illustrative pieces. And that's one place where I do have some experience in marker. And you can learn blending techniques that way too, that can translate to realism, for instance. So I have worked with these markers a bit more when it comes to illustrative things. Like in my sketchbook, and I did a drawing of an elf a little while back, last year around Christmas time. Things like that. But I really want to try something in realism, and I'm glad I did. So right now, I'm sorry that it keeps going off screen. Here's the finished piece. I hope that you like it, and I will be doing more like it. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit subscribe, and
Feel free to come back next week where I show you how I drew the background trees for this colored pencil piece.